Okay, I can't wait. The word today is wait. I just couldn't lead in with a story. I can't wait. Couldn't sleep last night. So excited. Can't wait. And I literally can't wait for anything. I hate to wait. That's not the biblical principle today, but it is true. I hate to wait. I think a lot of us do. Often what happens in the Schneiderman household is Laura mentions something like, oh, it'd be really cool if we took this wall down. That night, I'm taking the wall down. Like, that's what's happening. I hate to wait, get excited about something. We're doing some kind of renovation. It's usually midnight. It's like really late because we get excited and start working on it right away. That's just how we roll. That's what we like to do. And pretty much everything, even gifts, especially gifts to Laura, I just get excited and don't want to wait to give them. So I'll come sneaking in the house and kind of hide the gift. She's like, what are you doing? I'm like, I got you something. Do you want it? She's like, well, okay, here it is. And then that's literally every single time that we give, I give a gift. And even my proposal, I couldn't wait. I had this great plan at age 19 of how we were going to do this proposal. And it was going to be, I picked a really unique date where it was February the 14th. Very unique. I was like, this is brilliant. This guy's a genius. And so Valentine's Day was going to be the date, and I was excited, but I already had the ring. The bad thing was February came around. And it was February 1st, and I'm like, I can't wait. I just have to do this. And we went to a Super Bowl party that was kind of hosted at our church. They were playing it. And it was like burning a hole in my pocket. I couldn't wait. And then I take her back home, drop her off, and then I go back home and I'm like stewing, like, oh no, I can't wait. And so I drive back to her house. It was like 11:50, get to her house at 11:59, because I'm like, I can't let another day pass. Knock on the door. And she opens up and then say, will you marry me? And all that beautiful stuff. But thankfully, it was a couple of years before social media and all that, where every person feels horrible about your proposal situation, because everybody's got like this 4-camera HD situation happening where they're filming everything. And then the wife-to-be must be the best actress of all time, because they act super surprised. Like, how did you not know? There's all these kids, he's got a boom camera coming in, and all this like slow motion as they're dropping flowers, and we didn't have that. But I can't wait. And that is literally what it is. We even know the Bible. There's a lot of verses on waiting on God. Popular one, Isaiah 40, verse 31. But they who wait on the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount with wings like eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint. And we're like, anybody got time for that? Waiting, I like the whole idea of getting on the eagle, let's soar, baby, let's do this thing, let's reach the next goal, let's get to the next place. But waiting, that kind of seems like a waste of time. And that's how it feels a lot of time, that waiting is a waste of time, but really, waiting is part of the plan. And that's what God's put on my heart, that waiting isn't just something that we got to get through, but it's something that's part of the plan. And God actually takes us through things. He calls us to wait on things because he's working some things in us and out of us, and he's getting us prepared for the next stage. But we have to go through that waiting period. And it was a couple of years ago for me that was and for our family, the most difficult time of waiting. Just left a ministry and went into this waiting period. Ended up being for about 2 years. Waiting. Knew God called me. Ready to get back in. Put me in, coach. I'm ready to go. And God's like, no, you can wait. But during that time, God did some of the best things in me because there was time to wait. There was time to develop. And I had a mentor, a pastor that said something to me that just always stuck with me. And he said, yeah, it seems like this waiting is pointless and you're wasting all this time and you're ready to get out there. But he said, God will redeem the time. And I found that to be true, that the time isn't wasted, but God redeems the time when we go through that waiting period in him. And we actually, Laura and I, we went to a Christian counselor to kind of deal with this, deal with the trauma, deal with these issues. And we went through to a counselor, and he was really helpful. And he kind of walked us through, okay, what happened, and let's just talk about it, and then kind of what's next. And ultimately, then he kind of looked at us, okay, during this waiting time, what are you going to do? And it kind of dawned on us, this is more like active waiting. It's something God is working in us. It's as we're working in the waiting that God is going to develop something in us. It's not just passive. We're not just sitting back, but God is doing something in us. And I want to say welcome. My name is Scott, one of the pastors here. And we've been going through a series called 7 Words That Will Change Your Life. And I've loved this series. I've loved all the stories and testimonies that people have had. And I love it because when you kind of look out and you see everybody, you kind of have a picture or an avatar or sort of, oh, this is who they are. But no, most of us have been through some really hard things. And I love how God uses those things and works in us and through us to ultimately tell a bigger story of what he is doing. And as we've been going through this, the first thing we learned was that you have to say yes to God. You have to say yes to those opportunities. So many of us, for so many years, I was this way for many years, were afraid to take a step out, afraid to, no, I'll just be hesitant, not really sure. But it's when you begin to say yes to God, he begins to open up these opportunities in these doors. And then when you say yes to God, we learn that you say no to sin. You say no to the world. You have to put up boundaries and say, I'm not going down that way. I'm not going that direction anymore. I'm going this way. To say yes to God, you got to say no to the world. And then you realize that enough is the next thing. Christ is enough, ultimately. That our identity is in him. Who we are is in him. That he has given us everything that we need. And then the next part was that sometimes, and many times, we have to ask help in our situation. Because we all go through hard things. We all go through difficult times, and we have to ask help. And I loved Ilsa's story where she then created a ministry out of this, and Eastgate Ministries. And then because the help that she received in her darkest time, she was able to help somebody else. It wasn't wasted. It's never wasted. God uses that to help somebody else. And then last week, we talked about being grateful with the word thanks. Realizing that if we're honest, our direction and the things that we chose and our sin, the Bible talks about no one chooses God, not even one. No one follows after him outside of his grace, and that all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God, and we deserve hell. And we begin to be thankful when we recognize, wait, but Jesus died for the least of these, you and me, those who were going away from him, those who were still sinning. He dies for us and brings us to himself. And as we will see that waiting is part of the plan, I want you to help me introduce somebody that's going to give their story. If you would, welcome Elizabeth Hoover. All right, well, welcome.
Good morning.
Elizabeth. And excited to hear, like I was saying, I couldn't sleep last night. Excited to hear your story. And there's so much, I think, that will relate to a lot of people and help a lot of people. And we look at your amazing family, your beautiful family, beautiful girls, and Mike, and see just awesome family. And people probably think, oh, man, wow, perfect. Everything's always gone right, never had any problems. And but no, you had a period of waiting, and I'd love to hear about that.
I did. I had a big period of waiting. So what you might not know from looking at that picture of my beautiful family there, my 5 girls, my wonderful husband, is that Mike is not the father of my 4 oldest girls. He is only the biological father of our youngest, Maisie, who was born last August. And before Mike, I was in a very, very abusive marriage. It was abusive physically, emotionally, and even spiritually. I was told no one was ever going to love me. I was told that I didn't deserve God's blessings on my life, and that if I wasn't happy, that I just didn't have enough faith. And it was a very, very dark, horrible, traumatic period in my life. I had such little faith, such little self-esteem for myself, such little belief that I was deserving of anything. I had no friends and no relationships. He actually moved us out to Arizona, where his family is from, and away from all of my family here in Virginia. And I was really held captive by him. He threatened to have me arrested with child kidnapping if I ever left him. And so I stayed stuck in this darkness. And I had this necklace that I remember holding on to in the darkest moments. It had a little wildflower on the front, and on the back it was inscribed with "Be still and know that I am God," which to this day is still one of my favorite verses that I cling to when things get stressful. And I would do that. I would just be still and try to calm myself and quiet my spirit and just know that there had to be something more, that God had something more for me. But I was waiting for it. I was waiting for God to swoop in and be like Jason Statham or Bruce Willis, an action hero, and rescue me out of this turmoil. And things just kept getting worse and worse and worse, and I didn't know what to do. I remember one night, I thought I was going to die. I was convinced I was going to end up being an episode of Dateline. And we had switched the locks in the laundry room to keep the kids out from all the chemicals and stuff. And I remember locking myself in the laundry room and just crying out to God, what do? I cannot do this anymore. I'm going to die if I stay here. And I can't leave my kids like this. I can't, because Lord knows what would happen to them. And I woke up in the morning, and I don't even know where it came from. It had to have been the Holy Spirit. I just had this conviction that I needed to move. I needed to get out. And so I quickly Googled the local women's shelter, how to get in touch with them. And I packed the girls in the car and I drove. And I remember knocking on the door. I'm shaking. I can hardly walk. I can hardly stand. And I knocked on this door, and this woman opened it. And I just remember saying, "Help me." And that's all I could say at that moment. And they did. They got me to the shelter, because when you escape from that sort of situation, you go to a publicly listed location, but then the shelter is not publicly listed, so that the person you're escaping from cannot find you. And I remember getting to the shelter, and we had our own room, which was really nice. And these women, these incredible women, just embraced us. And I remember feeling seen and heard and validated for the first time in 6 years. That's a long time to be beaten down and not be seen and heard. And these women just, without hesitation, saw me and heard me and validated me, and they helped me. And there was so much of God's grace and mercy in those women. They gave me snacks from their own snack pantries. They used their own money, their little resources that they had, to buy my children ice cream that first day, to put smiles on their faces. This one woman, Ari, was just a teeny tiny baby at that point, and I was upset, so she's feeding off of that, as babies do. And I couldn't get her to sleep that night. And this one woman came to my room, and she rocked her and walked her up and down the hallway so that Ari could sleep and I could sleep. And I just remember being so thankful for that, and just knowing that was from God. They helped us find clothes. They helped us sort through things and find things, because we had left with nothing. I think I had Ari's baby blanket, a bottle, and we had the shoes on our feet and the clothes on our backs. And I remember sitting with this woman in that shelter while we were sorting through the clothes, and she looked me square in the face and she said, "Don't get stuck here. You don't belong here. And that really resonated with me. And I knew I had to move more. Like it wasn't just enough to get out. I knew that I had to keep going. And so I got permission to leave the state because Arizona is a little bit different. You have to kind of do things the right way. And I wanted to, because I never wanted him to be able to, make good on his threat to have me arrested for anything. I got permission to leave. My mom flew out and picked me up, and I had the car, and we drove across country. And it was an amazing 4 days of reconnecting with my mom and laid this foundation for this beautiful relationship we have now. She's my absolute best friend in the entire world. And that was really, really wonderful. And on the way, my sister, I didn't know this at the time, but she put out like this APB on Facebook to all her friends, her church community. She's like, my sister has left this abusive relationship. They're starting over with nothing. Can you donate anything that you have? Well, we came home to the entire one side of my parents' 2-car garage full, 6 feet high, 1 car deep of stuff for us. And not just donated stuff people had used. People bought brand new stuff. And there were backpacks. There was everything the kids needed for school. There was clothes for all of us, toys for the kids. Everything we needed to start over was in that garage. When I was able to move out of my parents' house, we even were given furniture. And so it was really this beautiful, amazing gift. And it's like, I felt so calm and peaceful because I knew God was just bringing me through this. And there was light. Finally, out of all of this darkness, there was this beautiful light. And God was using all these other people to bless that and to bless that journey. And so I got some amazing legal assistance. There's some wonderful programs in this state to help women, and that really empowered me and gave me all the resources that I needed to get my divorce, and get custody, and get on my own 2 feet. I was gifted heavily discounted daycare. I know some of you ladies know how expensive daycare is. I didn't know how I was going to pay for that as a single mom. But this one lady heard my story, and she was like, pay me what you can. And so I did. It was amazing. It was a Montessori daycare, and the girls were incredibly happy there. And then I met Mike. So Mike actually is the one who hired me for my first job back in the workforce. And we knew each other for a few months, and he one day just kind of popped his head around the corner and asked me out. Now, he will tell you he was not asking me out, and we will argue about this probably till we're both in Sunnyside, maybe after that. But, you know, he's not here to argue. So for the record, he was asking me out. And I remember, he was ending his workday, so he went home, and I still had some time left. So I immediately start texting my guy friends. I'm like, I think that this guy just asked me.
Help decode this for me.
Yeah, please, decipher this. And they're like, well, it could be and it couldn't be. I'm like, oh, thanks for the help. Well, they're like, go prepared for either situation. I'm like, I don't know how to do that, but okay. So I went and met him for drinks. He had a friend who was closing this brewery or retiring or something, and they were having a party. And I remember thinking to myself, you know, if he's going to be worth my time, I'm just going to lay it all out there. The whole story, all of it. So we sat down, and I told him everything. I didn't hold back. I was as candid with him as I am being with you guys this morning. And I remember he didn't even flinch. He just looked at me and said, you are so incredibly strong. And I was like, oh, well, that was not the reaction I was expecting. So maybe this could be something. So we started hanging out and dating here and there. And I was like, well, I better throw him to the fire and let him meet all 4 kids because, I mean, that's a whole other level of crazy. So I got him to meet the kids, and I remember just watching him play with them in the yard and wrestle with them and tickle fight them. And I was like, I had this kind of flashback of my dad in my childhood and how awesome he was, throwing us around and running around with us in the yard, playing ball with us. And then seeing my dad later as a grandpa and getting to relive my childhood through that vision. And I was like, well, if this man treats my children the way that my father treated me growing up and how interactive he was with us, and that's what I want for my kids in my life. I want them to have that happiness and that active father who's there and plays games with them and all of that. And so we eventually ended up moving in together months down the road, and we were able to move down here to Harrisonburg, which he was waiting for a really long time because his parents are from here. His mom's from Harrisonburg and his dad's from Broadway, and but that couldn't happen until he met me, obviously. So we bought a house here, and I'm like waiting for him to put a ring on it, waiting. And he finally did at our housewarming party in front of all our friends and family, and that was wonderful. I tackled him, which is on video, which I did not know was being recorded. So I think there was only one camera though, not four. And things have been going really well since then until last year when he lost his job and then had a heart attack like the very next day, massive heart attack. And I found myself in this period of waiting for his surgery, waiting for his recovery, and it was very scary, but I also remember being very calm. Like I just knew that God had me. And I knew that regardless of what happened, that there was going to be light at the end of that wasn't going to be the end of our story. And there were so many people that God put into place, like he happened to have the heart attack the day that the best cardiothoracic surgeon was working at RMH. And then he had nurses and a physical therapist who actually go here to our church with him that first day and days in the days after. And so like God just surrounded him. And there was this chaplain who is associated with our church that sat with me because I was there by myself. I grabbed Mike, threw him in the car, and brought him to RMH at like 4 o'clock in the morning when this all went down. And he sat with me, and that was such a blessing too. So God was there in the waiting and there throughout the recovery. And then all of this while I was 6 months pregnant. And then we welcomed Maisie in August. And it's just been, that was a beautiful period of waiting for her to come into the world and watching her grow and be in Mike's arm, watching him grow as a dad with a newborn. He's never experienced that before, so that's been fun for me. Because I haven't necessarily prepared him for all the fun little baby things, so that was fun.
And through all this, what would you say God taught you? What would you learn through all this?
Through all of this, the biggest lesson for me has been, I was waiting on God, but God was waiting for me. God was waiting for me to say yes. God was waiting for me to step out in faith. God was waiting for me to move towards him so that he could lead me through everything. And it was when I started to move that God started having all these pieces fall into place, and he started, doing that action hero stuff that I had been waiting for. And God makes rainbows out of the rain, and he brings light in the darkness. So don't wait.
That's good.
Don't wait.
Well, thank you very much. Can we thank Elizabeth? Good job. Such a powerful testimony, and want to get back into this. I want to kind of lead you through a story of somebody named Abram. And Abram lived a life of waiting. And he kind of did that, where he went from waiting, where it was like preparation, then to another waiting, which prepared him for the next phase, and he continued on that. And so throughout this, want to kind of show you a map of the journey that he took. We think waiting, like, yeah, I'm just stuck in one spot. Well, his waiting was very active. He went all over the place. where you can see in number one, in Ur, where he started, then he travels up, then finally God speaks to him, then he makes it to the promised land, and then from there, something happens, we'll talk about it, which causes him to leave, where God's going to work something into him and out of him, and then he comes back. And so if you have your Bibles, we're going to be in Genesis chapter 11 to start with. We're going to go from 11, 12, and 13 a little bit. And we're going to see what God does in him, because waiting is not passive. It's more like active waiting. And it reminds me of a story of kind of how the traditional Indian saris are created. They're traditional dress. They're very intricate, and it is from silk, very expensive, very intricate. And we all think, yeah, I want the end product. I want this beautiful thing. I want it to look right, but you got to wait for it. It takes a long time, and it's quite the process. And the way it's actually made is it takes a number of people, but there's one master weaver that has the idea in his head of how the intricate design will work, and other people are just working the loom. And as the master weaver tells, okay, go left, go right, put this thread in, put this new stitch in, do this pattern, the person doing the weaving just doesn't know the plan, but just watches the master weaver. And that's how it is a lot of times, really our whole life, where we just have to keep our mind on, where is God leading me? What's his word say? Where is he going to take me? I don't know the whole plan. I'm just going to follow his lead. And that's what we're going to see what Abram does. And he first starts out with this sort of preparation in Genesis chapter 11, verse 31. And it says, and Terah took his son Abram, grandson Lot, to Haran, and the granddaughter Sarai, the wife of his son Abram. And together they set out from Ur the Chaldeans to Canaan. But when they were there in Haran, and they settled there. So there he doesn't have a clear picture from God. He doesn't know exactly, he doesn't really even know God. He's not being led by God. He's just being faithful where he is. He's just doing all the things he needs to do. And ultimately, we see God must have built some character in him as he was actively waiting, even before he knew something was happening. And I begin to think, whatever stage we're in, maybe we're not the boss of the company, or maybe we're not have a clear direction from God, and we haven't started this great ministry. We don't know exactly what it is, but you're somewhere. And God's doing something in you, and there's a couple of things that need absolutely no skill where it can build character in you. And the first thing is just to work hard. Wherever you are, just work hard. Do your best wherever you are, grow where you're planted, just work hard and be faithful where you are. And the next thing is to just serve other people. And then when you've built them up, because then they'll get the promotion, then they'll do good, celebrate them. It's not a rivalry. You're not fighting against them. Just serve other people and know God's got something for me. I'm just going to serve other people. I'm going to build other people up. And the third thing is just be teachable. This is one of the most important things. Take the criticism, hear from people. Think, hey, maybe this person that's above me or ahead of me or a peer, maybe they see something I don't see. Let me just be teachable and coachable and learn from somebody that might see something I don't see. And then from there, Abram goes on and he finally hears from God. He's sort of this pre-waiting stage, but then he kind of steps into waiting where God gives him a promise in Genesis chapter 12, 1 through 3. It said, the Lord said to Abram, go from your country and your people, your father's house and your land, and I will show you, and I will make you into a great nation. You see all the things that God is going to do. The first thing he does is he makes his relationship with him right. Has that vertical relationship right. He's saying your identity is secure in who I've made you to be. You don't have to strive to be all these other things. I've made you this way, and you're good with me. And Jesus is the same way, where Jesus saw that we were sinners. He saw that we were far from God, and he died in our place for our sins, so we get invited into his family. Not because we did anything good. We didn't. We did the opposite. But then he invites us into his family. And he says, I will bless you, and I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. And then he has that horizontal relationship with other people. First, get your relationship right with God, realizing who you are in the identity that he's given you. Then he'll bless you with other people. First, God gives an identification of who we are in him, and then other people. That order is so important. And so the first thing that he did, he was just sort of wondering, who am I? What am I doing here? And we've all been there, or maybe we're there now. Where do I fit? Just figuring out our identity and where we fit in this world. But then he gets a call from God, and then he realizes, okay, God's called me for something. Then he goes into wandering a little bit while he's waiting. And even if we get a clear picture, I believe that God has this glimmer of hope, the light at the end of the tunnel, as Elizabeth talked about. She didn't know how it's going to work out, but just now we need to step into the sort of wandering, just taking steps, saying yes, just preparing, working hard, doing your best in the time that you have, and just waiting for that next step and that opportunity. And you're just trying to figure out, how do I fit? And the first thing to do is seek God in the waiting. And that's what Abram does. Genesis chapter 12, verse 7. Then the Lord appeared to him, and he said, to your offspring I will give you this land. So he built an altar to the Lord who appeared to him, and then he worshiped. He just worshiped in the waiting. We never should get disconnected with God. And he'll give you little things as you seek him. You'll notice, and I love this about God, when you ask for it, he'll give you little things of encouragement. Maybe somebody comes along and affirms something. You did something good here. You did something good in this place. And these little affirmations that God is bringing and using people to kind of help you along the way. It's not easy. There's still a lot of challenges, but little people, little things come in your life where they help you and give you these little compliments, or maybe these little encouragements along the way. So he's just wandering around. But then something happens. Nothing ever goes as planned, as we think it is, because waiting is part of the plan. And we have these various detours that we think happen. And Abram comes into the same thing because everything seems to be going good. Okay, I'm now, at this point, he's in the promised land. He's like, well, I'll just be on cruise control. I'll just wait here. And then God's going to make all these things happen. He will, but he's first going to do something in Abram. And the way he does this is allow famine to happen. So he's in the promised land. He's trying to cultivate it, trying to be a herdsman, trying to do all the things that he knows to do in the promised land. But then a tragedy happens. And maybe some of us have experienced this, but everybody is one phone call away from your life being changed forever. Or maybe a diagnosis from the doctor. Or you hear something, your kid is off doing something. And it just, everything derails when you get that phone call. You get that message. You get that information. You're like, I thought things were good. I thought I was good here. But then everything changes. And God, maybe he doesn't cause it, but he uses it, and he kind of uproots you, and he's a good, wonderful shepherd that cares for us and will take care of us. A famous verse talking about how God is the good shepherd. Ultimately, Jesus is our good shepherd. Psalm 23, verse 2, famous verse. He makes me lay down in green pasture. He leads me beside quiet waters. And we love that verse, and it's a good verse, but often we think it means we're just chilling, we're hanging out, we're just a lamb, we're a sheep, we're just soaking it up. Like the pasture's nice and it's finely cut. It's like a bed we're just sleeping on. And Jesus is sort of like bringing it, like, you want me to top you off on that drink there? And he's helping us out. And Jesus is there just catering to us. He's not that kind of shepherd. Because I looked up, what does that actually mean? Because it doesn't say he lets them lay down in green pastures. It says, I make them lay down. We don't like to lay down. We like to keep going. We like to do all the activities and do everything possible so we're not dealing with actual issues. But he says, I make you lay down. This is what it actually looks like. First, you got to grab the sheep that's running away from you. Then you got your buddy there with a bucket on his head. Don't know what that's about when you're surrounded by some weird friends. And then he uproots you, and then he plants you in the most uncomfortable, vulnerable position of all time. And then you got your friend just watching you, watching all this happen. You're like, okay, can we just do this waiting thing and in private? But no, a lot of time, God lets that be a little bit more public because it makes us deal with it. But a good shepherd lays the sheep down this way because then he's examining the hooves. He's examining everything that's going on. He's looking at that beautiful gut and trying to figure out what's going on there. But that's how good he is, that he brings uncomfortable situations to us to deal with what the deeper issue is. And Abram goes through the same thing, and he goes to Egypt because they have wealth there, they have food. So he goes there, and we aren't going to get into it, but he basically gets into a self-destructive behavioral pattern that follows him. And he creates this lie where he's really just trying to protect himself. And he makes his family vulnerable, his wife vulnerable, and lies about his relationship with his wife, so he's trying to protect himself. But I think there's some good news because I think he learns from this. And that's when it takes him to the next step, and he continues on, and he learns from this ultimately because when conflict happens, he has a better response. Because he's been through the fire, he's been through these issues, he's chosen the wrong thing. Failure is part of the process that we go through. Everybody fails, everybody goes through issues. That is actually the only way to learn. Success teaches you nothing, failure teaches you everything. And so I think he learned from that. And then he goes to the exciting part where he's just watching in the waiting. He's watching to see how God's going to put this together. It's like you start to see the vision that the master weaver has as you start to see colors separate and the pattern being woven out, and you're seeing everything happen, like the vibrance of the colors. You don't see the finished picture, but you say, oh, I see how this is fitting together. This is beginning to get exciting. But he does that through separating. He separates the colors, separates the pattern, and Abram is going to do that through separating from somebody that was going in a different direction. And he was in this family business relationship. What could go wrong? And he is with and he's with Lot, and they're very successful. God has blessed them, and they have a lot of money. Their herds have grown so great that the land can't even support them anymore. And they're beginning to bump up against each other. There's this conflict, and Lot is clearly not happy. So he goes to Abram and says, "There's this big issue. I got a bone to pick with you. I got something to say to you." But this is how you know where God worked in Abram's life, because listen to his response in Genesis chapter 13, 8 through 11. Abram said to Lot, "Let there be no strife between your herdsmen and my herdsmen, for we are kinsmen. Is not the whole land before us? Separate yourself from me. If you take the left, then I will go to the right. If you take the right, then I will go to the left." So he's so secure in knowing his calling from God, saying, I don't have to strive for anything. I can work hard, but I don't have to fight with anybody because I know God's going to bless me. And in fact, he knew it so confidently. He said, "You know what, Lot? You choose the best path. I'm not going to choose the best, and it's like, you just jump on board if you're ready, but if not, just get away from me because this is where I'm going." No, he said, "I'm confident in God. Why don't you choose the best path?" You can't really fight with somebody if they're going to bless you. So he blessed them as he went because they were clearly going in different directions. They had different visions for their life, and that's okay. But Abram knew where God was leading him. So he blessed them as he separated. And then this is the key part, because after that, it says, and Lot lifted up his eyes and saw. When you bless somebody with something better, then all of a sudden their perspective changes. They don't have to fight against that. Like, oh, you've got this business opportunity. Look, why don't you take that? Oh, this thing's coming up. Yeah, I see. You want that? I want you to take that. You can't fight with somebody that they're going to bless you with. And so Lot chose for himself the Jordan Valley. I've learned something from this, is that keep the standard where God is leading you, follow him, and other people will just self-deselect. You don't have to cause all the strife and fights and all that. Hold the standard. People will self-deselect. They will go the different direction. I love how it shows us that. And there's sort of an adage, like, show me your top 5 friends and I'll show you your future. And that's true. But it's also, show me your friends and I'll show you who you are right now. Because you begin to become the people that you're around. And 1 Corinthians 15:33 says, do not be misled. Bad company corrupts good character. It pretty much never works the other way around. You might go into the relationship, think, well, I'm going to change him. I'm going to change her. Or I'm going to change this friend group. Yeah, pretty much doesn't ever work that way, because bad company corrupts good character. And God wants us to bless them as they go. But the good news in closing is that God is the one working in your waiting. God is working in all the things that you've been going through. You maybe don't see an end. You don't see an end to the waiting, but there's hope. God is with you, and he's been working in it the whole time. And maybe you've thought that nothing's happening, but waiting is part of the process. And there might be something that God has called you to, and you are tempted with quitting. You're tempted with stopping this. Maybe this is a relationship or a marriage that God's called you to, or maybe this is a business opportunity, or maybe this is a ministry you know God's called you to. You don't see it yet, but you're tempted to quit. Maybe God's saying, well, just wait. Just wait it out. Things are going to get better. You'll see how things begin to come together. And don't you want to wait and see what it looks like and what God can do if you don't?